What's up, everybody? Welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about homeostasis. So homeostasis is, we're going to be talking about the concept of it, why it's important, how it's maintained, along with different control systems that it uses, positive, negative, no feedback. We'll also be talking about the different elements of it, the stimulus, the response, how those are interconnected, and we'll also talk about allostatic, homeostatic, or neither for variables. So what is homeostasis? It's the maintaining of proper internal environmental conditions. Why we do this is so that your enzymes, which are proteins inside of you that catalyze specific reactions depending on their shape, we do this because these enzymes work within a certain optimal range. And when proteins are exposed to environmental conditions that are outside of their optimal range, they don't function as well and they risk denaturing if the environmental conditions get too bad. So, and denaturing is not good. Denaturing is the essentially destruction, the changing, alteration of a protein. When you change a protein shape, you change its function. Proteins are kind of like locks almost. If you think of a protein or as a key and its job as a lock, the shape is the key to a protein. And so when it enters, it's able to do its job and adjust the lock or whatever. I don't know. That was kind of a bad example, but so yeah, so the shape is extremely important, and changing a protein's environment what can change its shape. So maintaining it within an optimal range is going to allow you to get the best results out of your enzymes. So things that would be considered a homeostatic variable are going to be something that you work to maintain within a certain range. It has a set point, which is an ideal point that it doesn't want to deviate from. And when you change the homeostatic variable, when it's affected, you use allostatic variables, which are variables that you change intentionally so that your homeostatic variable doesn't change. So for instance, an allostatic variable might be blood pH, okay? And so let's say you're running, and as you run, your blood concentration of CO2 increases, okay? So as a result of that, your blood pH decreases, sorry, but your blood concentration of carbon dioxide increases. What's gonna happen is, as you recognize this, your ventilation rate is going to increase because you're going to blow off more CO2 than you need to blow off more CO2 because you have too high of CO2 concentration in your blood. So that is going to be a homeostatic allostatic relationship in which you change your ventilation rate to accommodate to adjust your pH, your blood pH, so that it doesn't get too low. This is also something important. Keep in mind that about 80% of your energy demands are used for homeostasis, for maintaining those internal body conditions. So a lot of energy is used for maintaining internal body conditions. So as we can tell, this is a very important system that your body needs and requires just to live. So yeah, so we talked about that. Really important about the changing the environment for changing the protein's shape, changing the protein's function. So those are all really important. So another thing that we can talk about now is feedback systems. So how do we maintain homeostasis? Like one of these is a negative feedback system mechanism. So the mechanism for this is going to be, you have a stimulus. So I'm going to use my hands to do everything. So you have a stimulus. Let's say you're cold, okay? So your body temperature is you go outside, it's cold, your body temperature drops a little bit. You being cold is a stimulus that's going to cause the reaction of you shivering because you're cold, so you're going to generate some body heat, so your muscles, so you start shivering so that you produce body heat. This shivering reaction will then cause you to heat up a little bit, which is going to reduce the stimulus, the original stimulus of being cold. So in this situation, negative feedback system, these are self-initiated. This is really important. And it's also self-limiting. So when the stimulus is gone, the absence of the stimulus is going to decrease the response. The response exists as a result of the stimulus, and the response works to inhibit the stimulus. Next, we'll talk about positive feedback systems. These are different than negative feedback systems in that the stimulus causes a response, and the response amplifies or enhances the stimulus. So in this situation, we could use childbirth. During childbirth, the hormone oxytocin is released. Now, as oxytocin is released, it causes more powerful contractions in the uterine wall for the mother. And so this increased strength of contraction will then promote the release of oxytocin. Thus, oxytocin is increasing itself effectively through having more powerful contractions during childbirth. So that's a situation with positive feedback system. Now notice in this system, nothing lessens the stimulus. So therefore, these are not self-limiting. These actually drive a variable away from its set point. So these aren't typically used in a homeostatic, for homeostatic variables because, it's pushing away from a set point. So positive feedback systems are not self-limiting, and so you do need to know the difference between those two, and they drive the variable away from the set point, whereas a negative feedback system is going to limit the effect of the stimulus in such a way that it drives it towards the set point, and then once the stimulus no longer exists, the response no longer exists as well. And then we also have a situation of like no feedback system. This is where the stimulus causes a response. The response has no effect on the stimulus. So an example of this would be like in late adolescence in males, the increased testosterone release is going to decrease growth hormone production, and growth hormone production has no effect on testosterone. There's just something that happens, the stimulus causes something, and that something does not affect the stimulus. So that would be a situation in which you have a no feedback system. And then also just know when you're doing these mechanisms that you have to think through these step by step. So you have a stimulus, it's causing something. You have the response, and the response does it do anything to the stimulus? And you have to think through it stepwise. And then furthermore, it's not a need. So, if we have a runner and we have a swimmer, they both need oxygen. But if the swimmer is underwater and he needs oxygen, he can't just open his mouth and breathe just because he has high CO2 in his blood. If he opens up his mouth and tries to breathe, he's going to drown. So, but the runner's running and he needs CO2, so he increases ventilation rate. There we go. But so needs are not mechanisms. There's a way that these things are done. It's not necessarily looking at the why, but it's looking at the how. So that's really what you got to think about through when you're dealing with mechanisms. Okay, and then just to kind of leave you with, a situation. Let's say that somebody has a fever because they're sick. Would it be a better or a worse sign for them to be sweating compared to shivering? Is it better or worse for them to be seen? All right, here's your answer in 3, 2, 1. It would be a worse sign for somebody to be shivering than for them to be sweating in that situation, typically just because, and while, let me disclaim that with, sometimes when you're sick, you go through a fever, period of, shivering, and then all of a sudden you're really hot, and then you're shivering. Those cycles exist. But if you have a fever and you're shivering, that's indicating that your body is still too cold. And so you're trying to still heat up, which is not necessarily a great sign compared to if you're sweating when you have a fever. It means your body's trying to work to regulate that internal body temperature and reduce that effect of being hot, because fevering is increasing your body temperature. So, so thanks you guys for watching the video. Please stay tuned for more. If you have any comments, concerns, questions, please leave them in the comments, and have a great rest of your day. Later.